welcome to a very special bonus edition of Popped. Today, we are discussing everything about the PlayStation 5 event that happened this morning, Australian Eastern Standard Time. I'm Radio Mike. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Alex Dukovsky. How are you, Alex?
Good, thanks, Mike. How are you?
Good. Hey, Alex, let's dive straight into it. So many first-party and exclusive titles were revealed for the PlayStation 5 this morning, as well as the official design of the PS5. Start throwing your first impressions out at me.
Well, I woke up this morning at 6 a.m. I guess that's when it was showing in our time, and I watched through the entire event, what it's about, an hour and 20 minutes, watched all the trailers, and I think that was a bit early for me to digest everything that was going on. I don't know, did you see it this morning, or?
No, I didn't wake up to watch it. I was up by around 8 o'clock because it's my day off today, so I slept in. And I skimmed through it, and man, I'm very impressed with everything I saw. I would basically jump the gun and say that this pretty much sold me on a PS5.
Wow, okay, yep.
I guess we should start with the console itself. Design-wise, what do you think?
Yeah, I was about to ask you that. I think I'm in a minority at the moment that I quite like the design of the console. I think a lot of people I've been talking to today throughout the day, not a big fan of the two-tone design. I mean, there's been a lot of jokes made about the shape of it. It's kind of got this, well, it's not just a box, right? Like, it's not like the last few consoles that have been released sort of in general. I mean, what do you think about it?
I agree with you 100%. I think the design is great. I love the color scheme. I love the way that the DualSense complements the console so well. I just think it looks really sleek, very modern, and I think that's exactly what the PS5 needs to look like, frankly. I love it.
So would you say that, seeing the final design of the console and all the accessories kind of sold you more on the design of the controller, which we saw beforehand, but I know you were quite lukewarm towards?
I was mixed on the controller at first. This is totally, the coherence between the DualSense and the console, as I said, is incredible. I think the design is 10 out of 10. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, it looks like an internet router, or what, all these memes are popping up. But I think that would have happened no matter what it would look like, and I think the design will grow on a lot of people.
I mean, the Xbox Series X was, shown off a few months ago now, and it's just a rectangular box, and people are making jokes about that looking like a fridge and all sorts of things.
Well, I thought the Xbox Series X looked pretty much like a PC tower. Like, it essentially looks like that's the route that Xbox is going down, and it did look a lot like that. This is how I want consoles to look. Frankly, I look at consoles like the PS3 and the PS4, and I don't particularly think they were great designs. Whereas this, there's a bit of curvature to it. It's not like a straight, edgy kind of thing. It's like a slick, elegant design for a really cool piece of technology.
I have to say, this kind of design, for me, kind of reminds me of sort of more older Sony designs, where it was kind of more about that kind of form over, oh, it just does the job that it's supposed to, right? It kind of has this weird Sony twist that no one else would really do, or a lot of people think is kind of silly, but it's it kind of has its look. That is unmistakably going to be the PS5 look. I really like a lot of the design cues across all of it. I was just sort of watching that video this morning, and they showed off those accessories, and they showed off, say, for instance, the 3D enabled headphones or whatever it was. And I don't need more headphones, but I'm like, oh, those look really nice. I kind of want to get those headphones, Just quickly, what do you think about there's two editions of the console that they announced. So there's the regular edition, which has a disk drive slot, and then there's the all digital edition that doesn't, and sort of looks more symmetrical in its design, kind of a bit slimmer. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say first up that there's no doubt in my mind that I will get the disc, the physical PS5, the PS5 that takes physical media. As far as the design, I see what you mean. The disc drive on the right-hand side kind of does sort of break the symmetry a little bit. Frankly, I don't particularly care that much. I think the disc has to go somewhere. I don't care where the disc goes. Very interested more so in the decision to release a digital-only console. That, to me, is a very, correct me if I'm wrong, but unprecedented move in a gaming hardware.
Well, I will correct you because you're wrong. Oh, well, first I'll just point out, I guess, the Xbox One X Xbox One S recently kind of released an all-digital version of that console.
Okay.
I guess to sort of cut a few costs, make it a cheaper entry point to the console. And I don't really know how that's gone. I never really heard a lot about it. It seemed to be not cheap enough for people to really consider it over the main console, especially considering the Xbox One S has been on sale enough now that you'd kind of just go for that and probably get some pack-in games. And I guess Sony also kind of has a history with this as well. I'm just thinking about the PSP Go, if you remember that handheld, where they kind of just took away the disk drive of the PSP and made it completely digital.
I do remember that. Although I guess I more mean like as a launch thing. Like the PSP Go was a revision of the PSP, and it was like the 4th or 5th revision from memory. This as a launch thing is saying, hey, look, we're still doing this, this old form of media, but digital is the future. So if you want, you can just get digital games. Of course, I personally think in Australia, this will not sell very well at all because digital games are so overpriced compared to just buying them in a store. So I don't see it doing very well here in Australia where digital games are so expensive, but who knows what could happen. It's definitely them pointing to, hey, we're sort of looking at the future of gaming with this console.
One of the things, just quickly, I should touch on before we move on. One of the things I do like about the disk drive version of the console is they did highlight it has a 4K Ultra HD enabled drive, which means you can play those 4K Blu-rays and actually get really good quality movies out of that. The Xbox has had this with its revisions, but the PS4 Pro seemed to not go for that when they released that, so it's kind of been lagging behind a bit. I just think it's good that they're including that this time and saying, you can use that as an extra player, kind of how they've done in the past.
And there certainly has been this sort of battle, but in the past few consoles of balancing it between being just a video game console and otherwise being like a home media machine. And there was a reveal of like a media remote that you can get for the PS5, and I think that's important because it's them saying, hey, yeah, this isn't just for games, that you can watch your Ultra HD, 4K, whatever you want. There's a remote specifically designed for it. This will be an all-encompassing home media platform by the looks of it.
And this really is kind of that acknowledgement that 4K is going to be the standard for the games consoles, right? Like we've got these 4K enabled consoles already, but this is really the standard now.
And it means we all have to go out and buy 4K TVs, which are shockingly expensive, but I guess that's a completely different story.
Yeah.
Should we dive into the games that we saw? Is there anything else you want to talk about on the actual design hardware front?
Not really. I really like it. It's a lot nicer than I thought it would be. I think a lot of people were assuming it would look a lot like the dev kit images that were being thrown around, which kind of looked like a big V. So I'm glad it doesn't look like that. And that's kind of it for me.
Yeah, great. Well, I guess we'll start off with what looks to be maybe the flagship title for the PS5, which was Horizon Forbidden West, the long-awaited sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn on the PS4, which was honestly is still one of my favorite games of the last 5 years. It was such an incredible game. What are your first impressions? Did you play Zero Dawn?
I played a bit of Zero Dawn, and I did enjoy a lot of sort of the world. I especially liked the world and like the sort of combination of these, like a lack of technology with these sort of robot animals and that kind of blend of everything. I really, really enjoyed. Yeah, obviously you really liked it as well. It's a lot of people like this game. It's quite a big hit for the sort of towards the end of the PS4 life cycle. So I think we even mentioned in a previous episode of Pop, like this was almost something that everyone expected, that there's going to be a sequel to Horizon on the PS5.
Interestingly, in this trailer that they've given us, we don't really see any actual gameplay footage. It's more showcasing, I guess, the visual spectacle of the game, which I will admit, it looks pretty fantastic. There's a lot of different landscapes we see, including underwater, desert-style landscapes, icy, snowy-style landscapes. You get a really broad spectrum of this new world that Alloy or Aloy, I can't quite remember the name, is exploring. What did you think of that? Do you think we should have seen some gameplay in here?
Yeah, so, I mean, all the environments look incredible. And I don't think anyone could sort of say otherwise. I mean, especially there's a really nice variety in this Forbidden West trailer. I think it's a running theme with the show today. I do think a lot of the visuals are great, but we don't see... We tend not to see real sort of gameplay of the game, right? We're seeing what looks to be... I'm not going to say they're pre-rendered. Like, they had a big disclaimer at the start saying it's all running captured on the PS5, you know. Quite highly scripted segments of game, which I want to know how high fidelity it is, you know, kind of when you're actually playing these things. Like, how it all cuts together when you're actually playing the game for yourself, you know. I mean, how do you feel about the amount of gameplay they show?
I mean, I didn't expect to see too much gameplay from this one. I'm pretty satisfied with what we got. I think it's shaping up to look like a pretty incredible game. There's a scene, I'm just watching it on my screen right now. There is a scene where it does look like a cutscene where a Chinese-style dragon kind of appears, and it honestly just looks absolutely stunning, and I can just imagine how breathtaking this could actually look in HD. I like how we're seeing organic life forms in the game. Like, if you've played the first one, you know it's all robotic creatures that you're fighting, and it seems like the Earth is now starting to be repopulated by organic animals, which I think is really, really cool. I cannot wait to play this game. I think it looks absolutely incredible. It is exactly what PlayStation needed to launch the PS5 with. However, there is one gripe I do have with the trailer, and that is the fact that featured quite prominently several times is underwater sections where you're swimming, and as people who listen to this show know, I absolutely hate swimming in games, and I do not think there are many games that do swimming well, so I am highly skeptical about that.
Literally, as I was watching the trailer and they showed all those swimming sections, and I'm like, I can't wait to hear what Mike has to say about this. I think, and they, in the voiceover, you know, they talk about exploring these things and new depths and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, water sounds like it'll have a really big part of this game.
I know, that's what I thought as well, because being underwater was one of the first things they showed, and I'm like, oh no, it's a highly underwater version of Horizon, which sounds terrible. But I mean, I've got to go back to this thing that visually, it even underwater just looks so incredible. Like, I can tell this game is going to be so just charming to play and to watch.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the visuals are so striking, especially all the colors. Like, this game uses color, at least from what we're seeing. Like, uses like a lot of big, bright colors. Is going to be so nice to...
So I think we're both pretty clearly excited for Horizon, but slinging into the next game, and probably, I know that was a great segue, but probably the second, I guess, flagship title. And I believe we did do predictions on what the 3 flagship games of the PS5 should be. And I think both Horizon and this title were on it, which is the sequel to Insomniac's Spider-Man on the PS4. It's called Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, which takes Miles Morales, the character from that first Spider-Man game, and you're now playing as him as Spider-Man. What do you think of this?
Yeah, so I think it looks like, the visuals and everything we're seeing so far, just, it looks fantastic. You know, there's some shots of New York there in this trailer, and it just looks incredible. And there's these snow effects that is definitely something, you know, that looks so high quality, something that really, I guess the PS4 probably wouldn't be capable of doing to this degree. I'm interested to know, I've seen a few people talking about this and a few sort of insider things about it to kind of suggest I wouldn't really consider this a Spider-Man 2, right? Like, it's not a full sequel to the, like, Spider-Man from PS4.
Right, what makes you say that?
I think it's kind of the way it's pitched as... It's almost like a side game. I think people have sort of been suggesting to think of Uncharted Lost Legacy or games like Infamous First Light, where they're kind of...
Okay.
You'd call these like standalone expansions kind of thing. You know, where it uses a lot of that tech, a lot of the base from those first games, And I mean, I think it's really smart if they're doing this, kind of creating another game using that same world from Spider-Man PS4 and breathing new life into it and really bridging the gap between the generations.
Yeah, interesting. I was kind of thinking, as much as I want to dive back into New York and be Spider-Man again, one of my main concerns about this game is, one, how does Miles Morales Spider-Man play differently to Peter Parker's? There's not going to be that initial feeling of slinging the webs and flying essentially through New York City. You'll already know that feeling. How are they going to differentiate that? By what you're saying, I doubt they are. In that case, how is the combat going to be different? What abilities does Miles have that are different to Peter Parker? That's what I really want to see, because if Miles Morales turns out to just be a different skin of Peter Parker with all this pretty much the same abilities, this game's pretty much going to be a repeat. Same if the basic combat and if the missions are similar, like the going around New York beating criminals and stuff. If the combat doesn't drastically change with really great, compelling new abilities, this game is not going to be as good as people want it to be.
Yeah, I mean, Insomniac do a great job at really delivering sort of high quality games, so I'm sure they've got some sort of surprises in store to make it not just the same thing as Spider-Man PS4. I mean, I know there's parts about Peter Parker's story in the original game that need to be sort of resolved and continued as well. So I don't know if they're going to sort of sow the seeds of any of that. But I know Miles Morales does have some abilities, to do with like electricity and that sort of thing that they could sort of bring in to really sort of change up and put a fresh spin on the Peter Parker gameplay.
It's interesting because I just wonder, because at the end of Spider-Man, Insomniac Spider-Man, I believe you see, I could be getting confused with the movie Into the Spider-Verse, but I believe you see Miles get some ability, like show that he has some abilities to be Spider-Man. I think that happens. Correct me if I'm wrong, people listening and watching. And that makes me believe that this is a sequel in inverted commas. But also, where is Peter Parker during this game? Is he the one that you're trying to save, or is he stopped being Spider-Man? I'm interested in the narrative as much as I am the gameplay.
Or maybe, Spider-Man 2 will come out afterwards and it'll have two Spider-Mans.
It'd also be really cool if we got an Into the Spider-Verse style Spider-Man game with lots of different spider characters you could play between.
Yeah, that would be excellent.
One final thing I want to say about Spider-Man is on kind of a linked note, everything has been very quiet on the front of that Square Enix Avengers game that was looked at E3 last year that had really, really mild to lukewarm reactions from fans. Do you think that game's gone into damage control and they're maybe trying to rework it for the PS5? It just seems to have been suspiciously quiet.
I didn't actually think about that. I think...
that game was so forgettable. I only really thought about it because Spider-Man is from Marvel.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it's still sort of coming. I imagine that's a big game for Square Enix and the developers behind it. I think that's Crystal Dynamics. I could be wrong there, but who've done Tomb Raider and that sort of thing. So I imagine that's still coming. I think. But that's a game that they don't want to re-reveal a game like that and get the same response. I would imagine that's kind of where they're heading with that.
And just on a similar kind of note, I did notice in the Spider-Man trailer, at no point, it does say that it's a PlayStation exclusive and it says captured on PS5, but at no point does it say, I'm not sure they said it was an exclusive PS5 game. Could it be coming to PS4?
I think one of the things to keep in mind with a lot of this is, I think they've kind of referenced the fact that Sony really believes in these generations and they want you to have these new games on PS5. I'd be surprised if any of these Sony exclusive games bridge the gap between generations. I mean, sorry, like Sony Studios games. I think if you're looking at some of the other games coming up, say by Bethesda or by Ubisoft or that sort of thing, it's more likely there that we'll see these kind of bridging the gap cross-generation games for PS4 and PS5.
Continuing on, one of the most exciting games we saw is a game called Ghostwire Tokyo, which is, as you'd expect, it's set in Tokyo. It seems like there's some, it's like a first-person, almost like a magic-style combat system or some kind of martial arts-style combat system. What did you make of this?
Yeah, there seems to be some like melee combat and like casting spells and that kind of thing. A lot of like elemental attacks. I kind of need to bring up like Ghostwire Tokyo is not a brand new game that's been announced. Like it's a Bethesda title by Tango Gameworks, the developer, which was announced last year at E3, I believe, or even earlier. And was kind of pitched as this almost like a mystery or horror, like a slower paced kind of game. And apparently the director of those has kind of left between then and now. And the game we're looking at here, to me, looks completely different. Like, this is not what I expected at all from this game.
Right.
And I don't think it's like what a lot of people are expecting from this. That said, like, I'm quite on board with the concept and like a lot of the visuals as well. Just a lot of, again, like some of the spells and stuff that are being cast look great. And the way the environments sort of take in all of that, all of the different lights and all that kind of stuff.
I really like the almost like the jiltedness of the magic, which tends to be more of like I guess an ancient medieval thing, and then the urbanness and the modernness of Tokyo. I really like that juxtaposition, and I just think it looks so cool. The other thing is I love Tokyo. It's my favorite city in the world. I'm seeing stuff like skylines of Shibuya or Shinjuku, the Tokyo Tower, and I am just so excited to wander through this world and wander through Tokyo. Like, you can see the main character in a Tokyo alleyway. There's vending machines on the side of the road. I think this is really going to capture, in some ways, that Tokyo spirit. Well, I guess that's what they're aiming to do here, and I hope they achieve it.
Yeah, my only concern with this game, sort of as we're seeing it, is that I don't really know what the game is. Besides we're seeing this sort of combat, we're not really, there's not really anything else on show. I don't know what kind of, like, how that fits into anything else, if you know what I mean. And I think I'm very, very curious to see more of it. And the last thing is, it's billed at the end of the trailer, and it's sort of come out. This is one of 2 Bethesda games that were shown, Bethesda published games, and they're shown to be PS5 console exclusives, at least for an amount of time. So it appears that this time, like, these games that are coming out from Bethesda are going to be on PS4 and probably on PS5 and probably on PC, but be skipping Xbox for quite some time.
Is that an issue for you? Like, why does that matter?
Oh, I think it's just interesting because I don't remember the last time Bethesda did this, and I did not expect that from some of the third parties coming into this PS5 presentation, especially when these are games that have been revealed before, kind of with the intent of, oh, it's everywhere. It's interesting to see Sony doing this timed exclusive strategy, which is something that Xbox did in the last generation, and I don't think particularly served them well. Say, for instance, getting the second Tomb Raider game and cutting it off from everyone else for a while. It's just an interesting strategy, I think. I didn't expect it.
One of the things I've just noticed from a gameplay perspective is if it seems like that when the character you're playing as kills an enemy, they then reach in and like grab into their heart, which kind of makes me wonder if that's kind of like a what's that mechanic in Doom Eternal where when you beat them you warp to them and rip their hearts out?
Oh, the glory kill system?
Yeah, it kind of looks like a glory kill kind of situation. And I wonder if it's going to be that fast-paced combat that something like Doom Eternal offered, but with a more magic and supernatural style fighting system. I think that would be really cool.
That would be awesome. Like, I'm super looking forward to seeing more of this game and working out what it is. It's got a really cool style and it's got a really cool concept. Just looking forward to seeing more of it.
I love all the different sort of elements of of Japanese pop culture you're seeing in it as well. Like there's a few like very almost like JRPG looking characters or inspired characters that are popping up in the city, and a lot of monsters and stuff. This game looks really, really cool.
Absolutely. So the next game on our list here is Hitman III. Do you have much experience with the Hitman series, or anything to say about this one?
I don't have much to say about Hitman. It's not a game series that's ever particularly resonated with me. Again, probably because it's more realistic, I guess, and I tend to move more towards like fantasy style games. What about yourself?
I've played a little bit around with the previous Hitman games, Hitman 1 and 2, quite obviously. And I know a little bit about them, that they can be really fun. I think they kind of have this sandbox style to them where, you're almost puzzle solving, using your environment and what's around to do your hit. It's really fun trying out different things and having them go completely wrong and, having to scramble and fix things. And there's a really fun energy to a lot of that, but it's not a game I've spent a lot of time with. One of the interesting things about Hitman 3 that I think is happening is when they released Hitman 2, what they did was they went back and updated all the levels from Hitman 1 and brought those into Hitman 2. And the developers behind the series have mentioned sort of wanting to do the same for this game to close out the trilogy, so that you'll be able to play at some point the entire trilogy of games sort of in the last game.
Oh, okay.
So this could also mean that if you've never really played Hitman before, at some point Hitman 3 will be the jumping in point that you can play the entire saga in like a completely up-to-date version of the game and sort of catch up on that as well.
Oh, that sounds really cool. Do you think that this Hitman is a Square Enix title? Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't believe so anymore.
Oh, right.
So Hitman was a Square Enix franchise for a time, but I believe before the second game, Square Enix actually decided to sell off the franchise and the developer.
Okay.
And they kind of spun off into their own thing. So the last game Hitman 2 was put out by Warner Brothers. So I don't think they've announced sort of who's putting together this next game, but it is coming to all consoles. So it's another one that's sort of multi-platform. So I'm not going to expect that this one, is anything to do with Sony specifically. But apparently this one's also coming to the PS4.
Okay, right.
So that'll just be an interesting one because this is a third-party game. This is not one of those games that Sony's saying, oh, like this is part of our strategy to keep it going. We believe in generations kind of thing. This is potentially one of those bridging games.
Just running through the trailer on my laptop, and again, like one thing that I didn't think games could look better than they did. Do you know what I mean? And all of these are just looking so incredible. That brings us to our next title, which is probably my personal highlight of the whole presentation. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, which is looking to be an incredible game. What's your experience with the Ratchet & Clank series?
So I wouldn't say I've got a huge amount of experience with the series. I mean, for me, the game I played the most of was actually the remake of the first one that was on the PS4. And I quite enjoyed that, but I never really got around to finishing it. Something about it just kind of, I ended up dropping it. But I know you're quite the fan of Ratchet & Clank.
I just think what Ratchet & Clank did originally on the PS2 was to take the third-person platformer and mold it with a third-person shooter and just created something that, was so much fun, so vibrant. The physics of the game and the speed and the fast-paced nature of the game was so fun. And I think every single title in the Ratchet & Clank franchise is so, so good. The problem that ended up happening with it was the games became so refined that it started to become very hard to innovate them, and to a lot of those games are based on the weapons, the difference in the weapons, the wackiness of the weapons, and a lot of them just started feeling like rehashes of the weapons that you'd played with before. And for that reason, Ratchet & Clank kind of just sort of took a back seat in the PS4 generation, with only the one you mentioned, the remake of the first one, coming out. So this is our first really new Ratchet and Clank game in a very long time.
I will say the remake did come out sort of with a movie as well. If it wasn't for that movie, I wonder if they even would have had a game for the PS4.
Yeah, and the movie was a notorious non-success as well, which is a shame because this franchise is really lighthearted. There's a lot of comedy in it. There's a lot of fourth wall breaking. It really does feel like, honestly, this may be a stretch, but even in the sense that it's a 3D platformer at its core, it kind of reminded me of something like Banjo-Kazooie or something like one of those old 3D platformers with these shooting mechanics added in, and I just felt like they play so well. Again, the issue was, I think, the tiredness of the format. This does look like it's kind of shaking it up with a few different gameplay styles in there, which I think is important, but at the same time, the core gameplay mechanics seem to be there. What I did get out of it is it looks like there may be more of an open world style from it. That's just from what I saw, whereas in the previous games, it used to be quite small-ish worlds that you could, fly between the worlds in the spaceship. This looks maybe like there's a more of an open world vibe to it, possibly.
I definitely get that kind of vibe. You can see in the trailer there's these sections where Ratchet's riding kind of some sort of creature through this sort of big open space. And especially in those sort of sections, you think, is all of this, can you just go off in any direction? The game looks fantastic. And I think this is one of the games shown off today that you actually get to see more of what looks like real gameplay than any other game.
Well, after the official trailer, they did show off some actual gameplay from the game as well, which I thought was great. And you're right, it was one of the only ones. I think what I think is really cool is it looks like, and from the title as well, both Ratchet and Clank seem to be separated. The game is called Rift Apart. And at the end of the trailer, another female Lombax, which is the species of animal that Ratchet is, appears. And one of the main sort of narrative points of the games is that there aren't many Lombaxes left in the world. So as someone who's slightly invested in the lore of the Ratchet and Clank world, I think this looks really interesting. And my theory is that Clank is going to team up with this other Lombax, and you'll be able to possibly play as both her and Ratchet, and they'll have different play styles, which I think is a much needed shake-up to the format. They have tried to sway from the main format in the past, with such as Ratchet Gladiator, which was also known as Ratchet Deadlocked internationally outside of Australia, as well as Ratchet and Clank All for One, which was a 4-player co-op style game. None of them were ever as successful as the mainline games. So look, this game will be a good game, even if it just does Ratchet and Clank as it's always been, but it does feel like they've thought a lot about how to shake this formula up but stay true to its origins, which is exactly what this franchise needs.
I think it was also really smart in showing the gameplay of Ratchet and Clank in this presentation. Ratchet and Clank on PS4 has some of the best, most complex visuals of any PS4 game that I played, especially in that sort of cartoony style. They pack in so much detail. There's always things flying around, and you see that here as well in the new game Rift Apart. Some of the visuals in this, that's why I really like how much gameplay you get to see of this game. I think that they kind of hinted at, they're showing off ray tracing and this other sort of stuff, and you see these really realistic reflections on the shiny tiles through this. It sort of looks like a transport terminal and that sort of thing. And you see the shininess of Clank's, the reflections off Clank's head and that sort of thing. And you also just sort of get this impression, the PS5, they've been talking a lot about the those visual capabilities, and also about the loading times and SSD speeds and all of that sort of thing. You definitely get the impression here, you're jumping through all these different dimensions, and it's, I imagine there's this kind of dimension jump animation that is almost it's almost like a loading screen, but it goes for about a second. Right? It's like that. It doesn't break your immersion of the game.
And those are the riffs of those are riffs. Obviously they're the riffs that the title refers to. And it seems like there's this mechanic where you can you have an item that can pull a rift to you, and as you said, you go into the rift and you're sort of in a different area almost instantaneously. Also in the gameplay trailer, you do see a bunch of new weapons, and again, the weapon fatigue in this series got really real after a while. It was always a bit creative, but again, a bit rehashy. I'm already seeing weapons that I don't think have ever really been done before. There's one that seems to be some kind of sprinkler-based weapon, which makes flowers burst around enemies. There's also a torpedo-style weapon, and you're always going to have those core weapons, which are just your standard blaster and bomb weapons, which have really been in every game. But it seems like even the bomb has some kind of poison explosion effect, so it is cool that they are really trying to shake it up.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to playing this game, and I guess I haven't had a long history with the Ratchet and Clank series like you, but this just looks great, and like this looks like the exact type of game that I really want to play, and that this gets me really hyped for the PS5. I really hope this comes out soon, like to the launch of the console itself.
I mean, it does definitely look very polished, like it looks pretty finished, and the fact that we're seeing gameplay footage makes me believe that this game is close to finished.
Yeah, and even if they're calling it pre-alpha footage, it looks quite polished for something considered pre-alpha. And one last thing that I was thinking is, this is another game from Insomniac, like Spider-Man. Yes. So they've actually got two big titles coming, I assume, quite early in the life cycle of the PS5. And this one, you know, while less fresh in general than Spider-Man, if Spider-Man is kind of what we were thinking, like kind of a rehash of the previous Spider-Man game, they're sort of getting these two big games, which will be a huge showcase for the system very early on.
This looks absolutely awesome. Moving right along, because we've got so much to get through, Demon's Souls is the next game we will talk about here. Can you tell me a bit about this? Because I'm really unfamiliar with the franchise.
Yeah, so Demon's Souls, for anyone who's sort of unfamiliar with it, was kind of the precursor to the Dark Souls franchise. So I believe the story is sort of Demon's Souls was created and I believe published by Bandai Namco, like the company behind it. But the company behind it, From Software, didn't really have the rights to create a sequel to Demon's Souls, so they ended up sort of creating their own spiritual successor franchise. But Demon's Souls is kind of where that Souls franchise begins. But it's been stuck on the PS3. It's been... all the other games have been put on various other platforms since. Mm-hmm. But Demon's Souls has kind of been stuck on the PS3 and never sort of got the love and attention, I guess, since the franchise blew up.
Right, so this is actually a remake of that game.
Yes, so fans have kind of been wanting a re-release of Demon's Souls for a while. You know, it's again, because it's such a big series, but it's not on, like, yeah, it was only on the PS3. And a lot of people just didn't get around to it at the time or didn't even know about it. It was kind of more of that, at the time that Demon's Souls came out, it was just way more unknown than it would become later, of course. And so this is a remake being done by Bluepoint Games. And they are, like, in my opinion, one of the best studios to do one of these remakes or remasters. On the PS4, for instance, they did the remake of Shadow of the Colossus, which I think is a fantastic remake.
Yep.
And prior to that, they were known for quite very high quality remasters and ports. So they did the Metal Gear Solid HD collection on PS3. They did Shadow of the Colossus and Ico on PS3. I think they did things like PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale to the Vita, which is like a surprisingly high quality port considering what they were doing there. Like they've got their hands in a lot of really good quality work, especially when it comes to sort of translating games faithfully from one platform to another. They did Titanfall 1 for the Xbox 360, which I don't know if you remember. Titanfall was supposed to be a big Xbox One exclusive, and then it came out also on the 360 and had no business looking and playing as good as it did on the 360. But it's thanks to this studio. So I believe that the Demon's Souls Demon's Souls remake is definitely in good hands, and it's definitely a really cool game to, you know, it's a Sony game originally, but it's a cool game to sort of show how far the PS5, like what they've got available to them, compared to the PS3. They've also talked a bit about how there's going to be 2 modes in the game. One that focuses on resolution and graphics quality, and one that focuses on frame rate, which is really interesting.
Okay. Yeah, that seems strange to me. I don't love the sound of that. Let's keep moving along. Resident Evil VIIIage. The best part of which so far seems to be that the title Village incorporates the Roman numeral 8 in the title, which is really cool. Again, not overly familiar with Resident Evil. Don't know if this franchise is quite my style, but it again looks fantastic. What do you think?
Watching the trailer, I had a couple thoughts, and one was I don't know if this game so far looks like it's as big a leap on the PS5 as compared to some of the other ones. Knowing now, I believe that this one might also be coming to prior generations. But watching the trailer, I kept thinking, because, this morning I had no idea what the trailer was when I was watching the presentation, right? So I'm watching this zombie thing. I'm like, is this Resident Evil 8? Like, I know that that's supposed to be coming. Is this it? And then they put the title up on the screen and it says Village. And I'm like, oh, is this something completely new? Oh, I was wrong. I guess I was wrong. And then it turns into the Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil 8. And I'm like, oh no, I was right. I'm just an idiot. But I really like that, what they did with the title. I'm not overly familiar with the Resident Evil franchise, and I really wish I was. I wish I could really get more into those survival horror games. This one looks like, it looks really cool from what I've seen so far. I do know that they kind of tease a villain at the end of the trailer who is, prior to this, a series, he's a protagonist / good guy character. So it looks like he's becoming a villain in some capacity, or they're teasing it just to mess with everyone. So that'll be interesting for long-time fans, I suppose, as well.
Sackboy: A Big Adventure is the next one that I'd love to talk a little bit about. This is featuring Sackboy, the main character in the Little Big Planet franchise, which was really, really successful, but it seems like they're moving away from that world builder or stage builder kind of vibe that Little Big Planet was, and just doing an actual 3D sort of platforming adventure. I think anyone who's into Nintendo could very quickly see similarities between this and the Super Mario 3D World and 3D Land games.
Yeah, this is absolutely a reason I'm interested in this game. I think I never would have expected Little Big Planet to have even a spin-off like this. I don't know, I just never really thought that this would be a thing that happens. And I don't know if Sackboy is particularly a character that I'm invested enough in to make this, work. But I don't know if there are enough sort of couch co-op games and like this. And Super Mario 3D World is super, super fun in multiplayer. So as long as this hits some of those notes, it does feel like some of the encounters that are gone through kind of feel like they would be very cramped with 4 players.
Okay, yeah. I'm looking at it now on my screen. To me, I think this can work really, really well in co-op. I just think that the drawing card of the iconicness of Mario and friends obviously isn't here. I think Sony has really been trying to push Sackboy as their flagship character. I don't think he's as appealing as many of the Nintendo characters, which is a shame, but I still think this game will be good. I don't know if it will sell amazingly because I don't think the characters have the drawing power of Mario and friends, essentially.
It's, yeah, like you say, Sackboy, they kind of positioned as one of these mascots for PlayStation a little while ago, but we haven't really had a lot from the franchise in a while. I believe, we had a Little Big Planet 3 on the PS4 that was almost silently released, I feel. And it wasn't by the original developer who went on to make Dreams and that sort of thing. So we haven't seen much of Sackboy in a while. I think the problem is he's just a bit generic as a character, and he's supposed to be. He's kind of generic as a character, and it's interesting to have a big mascot platformer with a mascot that is literally an empty slate.
I guess just looking at this trailer, it does seem like all the other co-op characters in the game are they do look as though they've been custom made. So I think the drawing part of this game will be that you can custom make your own Sackboy the same way you could in Little Big Planet. So I think the drawing point will be that you can play as like your own custom character in this game.
I'm really wondering how much of that Little Big Planet DNA they kind of bring to the Super Mario 3D World formula, because that could be really interesting, but a bit hectic in a co-op situation as well.
I'm really excited for this one. I think it will be a good game and I'll probably pick it up. The next one I'm pretty impressed by, but don't know if it's quite for me. Gran Turismo 7. And I don't actually remember when the last Gran Turismo game came out. I know the last one I played was on PS2, and I think it was Gran Turismo 4. What's your experience with this one?
I don't have the biggest history with Gran Turismo series either. I think I had Gran Turismo 2 on the PS1, and then I kind of didn't know anything about the franchise for a long, long time. I did pick up, however, Gran Turismo Sport for the PS4, so I believe that's the last title in the series, and I'm not sure how that's generally received, but I had a really, really good time with that game. Ever since, in the years since dropping Gran Turismo, I did pick up some of the Forza games, and I do feel like Gran Turismo Sport was kind of more comparable to them rather than going for the straight simulation aspect.
What was the difference between Gran Turismo Sport and any other like Gran Turismo game or a Forza game?
I think Gran Turismo Sport kind of pitches itself as more like a casual kind of game compared to the main series. And in that way, like sort of Forza has its own 2 series. It's got the Motorsport series, which is more based on like simulation racing. And then it does have a kind of more, I mean, Forza is a different kettle of fish here with its Horizon series, which is big open world racing sort of thing, which is definitely not what Sport is. But one of the things I really liked about Gran Turismo Sport was its VR support, which I don't think this game will have. They haven't said anything about VR for PS5. Like, racing games kind of always end up looking some of the best on the console, and I guess they get away with that because they don't have, they don't have to load in these massive, massive worlds. They have to render this track. And, and often when you can't go off track, it means they can go really, really nuts with the visuals. So this game looks fantastic. It looks, at times, completely photorealistic. I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays, what it looks like in general. But it is kind of just another Gran Turismo game so far.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, there are people who will love this game, and I'm sure it will be great for people who are into racing and people who are into cars. For me, I'd always rather a kart racer. I'd always rather something like Mario Kart or Crash Team Racing. Like those are more fun for me. They're a bit more vibrant. It's not really about the car and the sport of racing. It's more about like the aesthetics. But I think this game will do what it needs to do for people that want it.
So the next game up on our list is Grand Theft Auto 5 and Grand Theft Auto Online. And for context here, that they opened the show, basically this is the first PS5 game that we know existed, that they're doing a port of Grand Theft Auto 5, which honestly I thought was absolutely ridiculous that they opened the show being like, Grand Theft Auto 5 for PS5. I think, what do you think about this being announced?
I'm pretty indifferent to it. I think this is great. Like, this is obviously a big title. I probably won't pick it up. I've never really loved the Grand Theft Auto games, but it looks fine.
I think I was just kind of amused because like they kind of talk about Grand Theft Auto is a franchise that's been on every Sony console, and so we're bringing it to PS5. But realistically, they haven't had a new game since the PS3. And it's been brought to PS4, and now it's being brought to PS5. Grand Theft Auto Online is incredibly lucrative for Rockstar, so I'm sure that's in no small part the reason they're bringing it over. And I know they're doing some visual tweaks and all that sort of thing, but this is a 7-year-old game that they're bringing to, that they kind of opened the show with. This is the game we're bringing to, one of the games we're bringing to PS5. And I probably will not pick this up. I will not like triple dip for Grand Theft Auto 5 on PS5. I have it on PS3. I got the first visual upgrade on PS4, and I think I've had enough time with this game to kind of just not have any more time with it.
So you're just holding out pretty much for Grand Theft Auto 6?
Yeah, I mean, I think Grand Theft Auto 6 would have to be significantly different at this rate to even sort of pull me in at all. But yeah, I don't know if another release of 5 is sort of worthwhile to me.
One of the more unique games that we saw was Stray. Obviously, we're going more into the smaller titles from here, so we won't necessarily have as much to say about them. This game, you basically play as a stray cat, again in like a Neo-Tokyo kind of looking environment, but it seems sort of dystopian. There's robots around. This game aesthetically really caught my attention, and playing as a stray cat seems really interesting. I don't know what the mechanics of the game are, though. What did you think of this?
Yeah, I think visually some of the most striking most striking work that they had in a lot of these trailers. I really liked, especially the opening and seeing the robots. You know, this is this world that, you know, all the humans are gone. And I really like the idea of playing as a stray cat. I don't know anything about the game. I can't imagine what the hell the game is. It's interesting. It looks really cool. The concept's really cool, and it's by a smaller studio, I think. So that's also really awesome to see. But yeah, I've got almost no idea what this could be.
Aesthetically, we're seeing a lot of distinct styles here, and there's one called Kena Bridge of Spirits, which really caught my eye because, I mean, it looks like I guess a third-person action-adventure style game. Could be good, could be not good, but visually, this game looks like literally a Pixar movie. Like, the animation is so animated in the style of Pixar, and I think it looks really endearing. I'm definitely going to keep my eye on it.
I believe the developer, they said, was like they're a film production studio, and that, so I guess that kind of comes across in their sensibilities of how the animation should work. And you yeah, like you said, it looks like it could be a movie. It looks like, you know, there's so many elements moving and alive in every frame of this thing.
Just before we wrap up, there are a few more games on the list. Alex, are there any that particularly stood out to you?
One of the first ones I was thinking about was Oddworld Soulstorm. So this is the sort of sequel to what seems to be a reboot of the Oddworld franchise. I'm not sure if you're too familiar with Oddworld from the PS1 sort of days, but the character Abe was in 2 games on the PS1, and then some other games later. This is sort of a long time franchise that's been dormant for a while. And there was Abe's Odyssey and Abe's Exodus. And they sort of reimagined Abe's Odyssey a few years ago as Oddworld New and Tasty. And then kind of that was actually quite successful and sort of kickstarted the franchise again. So Oddworld Soulstorm is a new sequel to that reimagining of New and Tasty. So they're kind of, the creator behind this has kind of finally been able to make a sequel that he really wanted to make originally and never had the time to do. It's been in development for ages now, and I'm excited that we're seeing more of it. But I can't, they showed so much like little tiny clips of gameplay that I can't really process it all as I'm just looking at it, and like I don't really.
Yeah, it's hard to know clearly what this game is. It looks like they're showcasing a lot of different mechanics, but it's unclear as to what the actual goal of the game is.
But all I know is it does look like it does have at least that classic Oddworld gameplay, this sort of 2D platforming style. So I'm just keen to see more of this for sure. Again, yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about, Mike?
Godfall looks like another cool action adventure hack and slash game from Gearbox and Counterplay Games. What I liked about this is it seems like it's medieval inspired, but again, a bit of fantasy, a bit of magic. You're fighting monsters with some creative weapons, but it looked like very fast-paced combat, which I liked because particularly in playing something recently like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I noticed when you're using heavy weapons, obviously it takes a lot longer after the input to actually use the weapon, but this looked like it's really fast-paced no matter what weapon you're using, so I'm going to keep an eye out on this one as well.
Yeah, awesome. I think for me, one of these other ones that, I mean, it's pretty far down our list, but honestly, the next game, Deathloop, this is probably one of the games I'm looking forward to the most of this whole set. And there's quite a lot of... The trailer that they showed gives you quite a lot about the concept of the game and the story. And just sort of how it all comes together and the sort of concept behind the gameplay and all that sort of thing. And I'm really looking forward to how this plays out. That's another one of the Bethesda published games. This one's by Arcane Leon, their Arcane studio is responsible for the Dishonored franchise, among other things, and they're just really, really good at getting that first-person sort of immersive gameplay. This one's another PS5 console exclusive, so it'll be on other things, so that's why I kind of was even surprised to see it here. But I'm super, super looking forward to this game. I really like the sort of concept of having these two assassins locked in a time loop, like trying to kill each other. And they've talked about there's sort of multiplayer mechanics in this where you can choose to be the enemy assassin and invade other people's games and be that assassin in their game and try and stop them, which kind of is this blend of single player and multiplayer that with this sort of invasion mechanic that seems really unique and really fun. And I'm really interested to see how it all plays out.
Finally, one we wanted to talk about was Astro's Playroom. This looks like it's very childish in its aesthetic. It looks possibly like a quite a simple 3D platformer collectathon. It does look kind of cool, but I wonder if the aesthetic suggests that it's going to be pretty easy.
So one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this one is because you were talking about PlayStation mascots before. And I almost feel like lately this character has been coming up in a few things now. And I think the last game, I think it's Astrobot Rescue Mission or something like that is the title. I completely forget. But I played that game. It's a PSVR exclusive game. And it's essentially like that Super Mario 3D Land kind of game as well. But in VR. And one of the best games, one of the best 3D platformers I've played in a while. And especially like fun to find that on PSVR. But of course the appeal of that was limited and the reach of the VR platform was limited as well. So I'm just excited to see more of this franchise, more of this character. Again, though, kind of more generic of the design for these 3D platformer characters, which is probably a problem for PlayStation, but
it does say in the trailer that this game is preloaded onto your PS5, so I guess this is like a free, sample game that they're giving you, so I assume it will be a shorter title. But the other thing that the trailer really focuses on is that the DualSense responds to what's happening in the world, and that's sort of a selling point of this game. For example, I assume it's just pretty much vibration of the controller being used in different ways, but they're certainly making a big deal about how this game stimulates your senses more than just a normal game, which I'm interested to check out. I think the Switch talked about that a lot with the HD Rumble that they talked about. So I'm keen to see how games moving forward will use more senses than just sight and sound to make the gameplay experience more fun.
It's interesting, actually. I didn't know that it was pre-installed on the PS5, but I believe the character kind of originated in what is essentially a pack-in game for the PSVR as well. So it's kind of like they're using this character to show off all these features of their new platforms, which is really interesting that they've kind of got a dedicated character to do that. And in the same way, like that Astrobot game I referenced used VR in such a better way than a lot of those other, like, I don't know any other platforming VR games, but they really make you feel part of the game. You can see your controller in the physical space in VR. And you see in this trailer as well, they've kind of got hints of, it's tracking the controller movement, so you can utilize the motion of your controller in the game as well. I'm keen to check this one out just because, and especially, it's installed on the PS5, in the PS5 from the start, so why wouldn't I,
Well, that pretty much wraps up our popped discussion on the PS5 reveal. Let us know what your thoughts are. Email us anytime at poppedpost@gmail.com. Guys, if you're listening to this on our normal podcast feed, thank you so much. We are also going to be putting this up on YouTube, and we want to do more discussions news based on this that are bonus podcasts that we're going to put on YouTube as well. There is a link to our channel in the description of this podcast, so please go and check it out. Subscribe. This will be up there. Give it a thumbs up because, it's going to be weird because you've already listened to the podcast version, probably. And yeah, guys, thank you so much. Alex, thanks for joining me again.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. Hopefully we can do some more discussions in the future, and thanks everyone for listening or watching.
Yeah, make sure to stay tuned to Popped for more things PS5, gaming, and pop culture in general. Check out the podcast if you haven't. Thank you so much for watching. See you later.